I am Marguerite Crespillo, and thank you for joining me tonight on Real Estate 101. So tonight I did actually not have any kind of an agenda. I had nothing in particular that I wanted to train on because I just wanted to really kind of chit chat, see what's going on out there for all of you guys, talk a little bit about what's happening in the market, where to go for resources and that kind of thing. So I thought I would first ask if you guys have any questions about anything particular, if you'd like to chat about anything in particular that I may be able to help you with. How many of you guys, since no one's going to ask anything, you're all being shy, how many of you guys have had a deal that has been really close to falling out, like literally the buyers or sellers signed the cancellation agreement and you were able to save it or not save it? I swear, I think the universe was screwing with me today or messing with me, but I have some clients I've been working with for a couple months trying to find them a mobile home under 200,000 in Placer County, which if any of you have looked recently, it's just about nearly impossible. There were a total of 12 mobile homes on the market. I normally don't even sell mobile homes, but these were referred clients that somebody really wanted me to help, and I opted to take them on. I just want to give you guys a scenario to get an indication as to what you would do, and I'll tell you what I did. We've been looking for about 2 months. They are elderly people who do not have the ability to DocuSign, which means I had to go back to old school. Some of you might remember old school when we actually had to have wet signatures or original signatures. We used to have things in blue. We used to have to use blue ink. These people are relocating from Napa. They do not do DocuSign, so they had to drive up here every time they needed to sign something, which included a couple offers. And then once we finally got offers involved, we've had this whole process. We're supposed to close tomorrow. Today, they were supposed to drive up, be here at 2 o'clock, meet with the mobile home park to get their final approval done, go and sign the final closing documents so they could go to the bank, so I could go with them to help them wire the money. And then we were going to go do a walkthrough. Well, they arrived early. They went to the house, and apparently there was a whole bunch of garbage in the house, or not in, but in the front, because the sellers had not finished cleaning up yet. They freaked out, got frustrated with the park manager who wanted to send them everything DocuSign. They don't DocuSign. And they called and said, we're canceling. We don't want to buy the house. I said, really? I said, all right, well, whatever you are comfortable doing. And I'm going to stop right there. And I'm going to ask you guys, what would you have done, or what do you think should have happened from there? This is interactive, engaging tonight. So you guys all have to undo your mics and you have to talk.
Yeah, this is Molly, and I have to ask, I would imagine you would say to them that, please explain what brought you to this decision, right? I mean, once they say we're going to cancel, okay, what happened? Tell me about it. And then I would probably just try to see the whole picture and figure out where to go from there. But it would depend on what they said to you next. And I know you're a solution person, so I would think that you came up with some solutions.
Thank you, Molly. That's some good input. Anybody else?
Go back and look at those forms that has something to say to the effect of they're acting against broker advice. Play out the scenario of what happens if they back out of escrow right now, the blowback from it, and kind of play out those choices.
Well, it really depends on what was in the contract. Did they write in that they had to remove all debris? And I mean, is there an escape clause for them if that wasn't performed? Was that part of what you'd asked to have done before the close of escrow?
These are all great questions to bring up because they can impact a lot of what happens from here, correct?
Let them know the contingencies have lapsed and they may lose deposits.
Were they coming from a place that they had already owned? Were they going to be able to stay where they were at?
I'll give you guys, as anybody of you guys that remember who was it, Paul Harvey back in the day, I'll give you the rest of the story. Couple things. They had a home in Napa. They sold that home and they have a 60-day rent back. Okay, so they have a 60-day rent back in order to get out of their home in Napa. They had removed all of their contingencies. There was 2 additional bits of information that I did not give you. And there was a refrigerator that originally the seller had said they'd be willing to sell to them. The buyers didn't get back to them in time, so the seller made other arrangements and got rid of the refrigerator. The buyers didn't really remember that they had not gotten back to me about the refrigerator, and they were completely expecting the refrigerator to be there. So they had, in the meantime, sold their refrigerator in Napa, expecting there to be a refrigerator in the home. The second situation is we're not closing till tomorrow, but technically the seller still has this evening to finish cleaning and getting everything out of the property, which they had said they were going to do last night. They got delayed. They didn't get it done. In the meantime, what I would normally do is I let people vent. They went off on a tangent. They were upset about the refrigerator. They were upset that there was still garbage and it hadn't been cleaned up. They're a bit stubborn and they said, forget it, we'll just go buy something else. So I did, as somebody earlier said, I think I took a step back and I said, let me just explain to you guys. You can completely do whatever you want to do if you want to cancel. Oh, let me also say this is a cash deal. Okay, so there's no financing contingency. So I said, you can completely do what you want to do. And normally I would give everybody 24 hours, because if you've been around long enough, like I have, and I know Molly has, is that when you give everything 24 hours, people go home and sleep on it. And I would say that 99% of the time, the next day, they're over whatever they were pissed off or upset about, and they usually will move forward and close. But in this situation, we didn't have 24 hours. I already had a notary lined up. The park was sending the stuff over. We had a lot of moving parts and pieces that needed to get handled. So I did exactly that. I said, if you guys would like to cancel, I'm happy to cancel. What you need to understand is that you have removed all contingencies, which means that your $3,000 earnest money deposit is not refundable. And I said, so I will bring you the cancellation instructions. We can ask for the deposit, and the seller has the right to cancel or not. So in the meantime, what I did is I called the agent and I said, hey, here's the deal. The buyers want to cancel. Usually I wouldn't have even called the agent, just so you guys know. I would give things 24 hours. I let people settle down and calm down and work through it. But in this situation, again, we were limited on time. And I said, hey, Trish, here's the deal. The buyers are canceling. They've decided that this, and this has gone on, and they're upset, and they're going to cancel. So I'm going over to meet with them to have them sign the cancellation instructions. I just want to let you know. She says, oh my goodness, that's crazy. She goes, well, it's okay. We have a backup offer. We'll be all right. Go ahead and get the cancellation signed. I said, okay. So I drive over. I get the cancellation signed to these buyers. I'm a little irritated. I vented a little bit to myself, right? I get home and I just let things sit for about an hour. The listing agent calls me back and she says, look, yeah, we have a backup offer, but the seller, who is a trustee, by the way, says, look, I don't want to deal with all this again. What's it going to take? What do your buyers really want? Now, this is unusual because a lot of times in this market, sellers are willing to move on, but many times they're not, because they don't want to start all over again. And so she says, what do your sellers want? Like, do they want us to replace the refrigerator? Like, what can we do? We just want to get it over with. I said, sit tight. Let me go sit and talk to them. Again, I give myself a little bit of space, call the buyers. I'm like, look, I want to explain to you guys a few things. Number one, you will lose your earnest money deposit. The seller has indicated they're not going to refund. Number two, I printed out everything for you guys to show you what is currently available on the market, just so you could see. And there were a total of 12 homes, nothing comparable to what they were in contract at. And I said, look, you guys have a decision to make. You can try to move forward and go look at some other properties, or you can tell me what is it you really want on this property and what can we do to make it work. They give us a few minutes to talk. They talked. They came back and they said, well, we want them to replace the refrigerator. And I said, well, we got a couple of dilemmas with the refrigerator. Number one, it was a used refrigerator, so they're not going to give you the full value. They're not going to go buy you a brand new refrigerator. And it's really hard to say. They're a trustee. They don't have the time or the resources to go driving around trying to figure out refrigerators. And really, at the end of the day, it's you and your refrigerator, what you want. So what kind of a credit are you willing to take in exchange for the issue with the refrigerator? Finally, after about 15, 20 minutes of them talking and making up a decision, they come back and they say, all right, if they'll give us $1,000 credit towards the refrigerator, we'll move forward and we'll close. So I went back to the agent. I said, they're willing to ask for $1,000 towards the refrigerator. Is your seller willing to do that? She said, yes. And we got this deal buttoned up after about a 4-hour roller coaster ride today. I wanted to give you guys that scenario because many of you may or may not have been in these types of situations. And what I want you to understand, especially as new or newer agents, is everybody thinks real estate is easy in a lot of ways. And sellers many times think that all we do is put a sign in the yard and that's all we do. It helps with closing deals because anyone can sell a home, not everyone can close them. Comes down to little things like this at the very end of the deal. And experience gives you some insight and some thoughts in how you can actually make things work. Many agents, especially we have new and newer agents in this market, coming up in this market, don't know how to get down to the fine lines and the fine wires of the end of the deal to make things work and make things come together. So what else did you guys just hear in that scenario that might help you in future dealings? Or what do you think could have potentially been done differently? This is why these kinds of conversations, you guys, are game changers in how you do business and what you learn that can help make the difference between you making it in this business and you not making. Because if a deal falls out like that the day before, and this wasn't a huge commission, but it's still a decent amount of money. It's $4,000 or $5,000 compared to the current market. Molly and I remember, and John remember when our average sales price was, $80,000, and commissions were, $2,000 or $3,000. If you can't find ways to negotiate and handle clients to close deals, you just don't make it in this business. So I'm curious what all of your guys' thoughts are. If you have any feedback, I've got another scenario for you in a moment as soon as we're done with this one.
It was a good save. I mean, you gave yourself some time to just decompress after the situation arose, and you let things absorb, and then you're able to think more clearly on what to do, right? And then number two, I think you did a great job of backing up your buyer and saying, absolutely whatever you guys want to do. And these are, matter of fact, this is what's going to happen. You're going to lose your earnest money deposit. You're going to do this. You know what I mean?
That was a good point, Chris. And I do want to point out is that one thing that I did not do is I did not kind of make them feel bad or upset, or I did not in any way imply that I was angry or frustrated, even though I was, or stressed out. I just simply said, these are the facts, right? To give them insight to allow them to make the decision without my influence or my impact. I wanted to give them the option, the opportunity to make the decision, because otherwise people are very quick to blame the agent. It could have easily become my fault. I screwed up. I didn't do this. I didn't take care of them. I didn't blah, 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 right?
Mm-hmm.
So it happens many times. And so the more that you can remain really neutral in a situation, the more that you can give them the space. You're just simply giving them the data to make the decision that they need to make. And then it also puts the consequences on them, right? So if they did not get their earnest money deposit, they can't be upset at me. It wasn't my fault. I did explain to them at length in detail what the options were and what the consequences were of making the decision that they were making.
I think a good thing that also probably helped them to get back into a better frame of mind about it was that when you printed up everything that was available and they saw the actual, again, straight facts of what's out there, what it looked like, what it would mean to them, that gave them really good input to rethink their big reaction. So that was a good move.
Because the number one reason deals fall apart many times actually comes down to ego, right? Somebody feels like they're getting screwed and, well, I am not going to let them do that to me, right? I'm the better one, or they, they're screwing me, or they did this, or, I mean, frankly, many times the reason deals don't come together have to do with the egos of the real estate agents involved, right? And luckily there's a good agent on the other end. And we both said, all right, what can we do? How can we figure out how to make this work instead of her getting pissed or angry or frustrated and taking it out on me, or vice versa, right? Me getting upset, angry, frustrated, and taking it out on somebody. Even though I was all of those feelings, just so you guys know, I'm certainly not, immune to that. but I did have to take a step back and say, all right, right? What are the options and how can I help these people? So let me give you another scenario. So I have a buyer who's been looking for a home for a little bit. We all know this market's crazy, and some of you might be seeing a tiny, tiny shift in the market. And I want to give you a couple scenarios. So this particular buyer, he'd gone out a few weeks ago. He'd written an offer on a couple houses. They didn't come together. He was frustrated. He said, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to sit tight. Takes a break for a couple weeks, calls me on Friday evening and says, hey, I found some other properties. Let's go see them. So we go out Saturday. He sees this one property he falls in love with. Luckily, I knew the agent on the other end. And again, this is the value of relationships, you guys. It's so important to get out there and make connections with agents. I happen to know the agent on the other end. And I'm like, okay, my clients really love this house. What can we do to make it work? He says, well, I don't have any other offers right now, but I'll keep you posted if I get some other offers. I said, great. So I go to my buyer. We write up an offer. I said, look, come in the best that you possibly can, and let's see what we can do to make this work. So the house is listed at $850. We write an offer at $855. The other agent originally says, hey, bring it in at $860 and let's see what we can do. My client says, no, $855. And it happens to be over in Roseville where they have that 1.5% transfer tax. So it was about $4,000 in a transfer tax. And my buyer says, okay, let's go in at $855 and have them pay the transfer tax. I'm thinking, crap, we're going to be up against other offers. He's going to get beat out again. But again, I step back. Doesn't matter what I think, right? I just have to advise my client of the best thing to do. So I tell my client, all right, cool. So we write up the offer. We get it submitted. In the meantime, I'm keeping in contact with the agent over the weekend. Yesterday, I get a call. I call the agent. I'm like, hey, I just want to check in. Did you get any offers? He goes, it's kind of crazy. We didn't get any additional offers. We only have your offer. And I said, well, that's really cool. Do you think your guys are going to accept it? He goes, well, I'm going to go talk with my people tonight. So the agent goes and talks with his people who, of course, are a little frustrated and anxious because they're expecting, like what has happened many times over the last couple months, multiple offers, thinking they're going to get way over asking price. So luckily, good agent on the other end, he sits down with them. He says, look, you guys, you could ride it out for another week and it's entirely possible you may not get another offer. Things are starting to slightly teeny tiny bit of shift, or you can just take this offer. We got a good agent on the other end. We can make this work, and 30 days from now, you'll be done. He gets them to accept the offer. Okay, so guess what? We have an accepted offer as is, no counter, which is awesome, right? Guess what can happen? Two scenarios can happen in this. What do you think is going to happen if I call up the buyer and I say, hey, guess what? Congrats, we got an accepted offer. What do you think the buyer starts to think?
That their house is theirs already, that the terms can't change.
No. I'm talking to the buyer. So if I were to call the buyer right now as is and say, congratulations, guess what? The seller's accepted your offer.
He's going to think he paid too much.
Molly. See, Molly's been around a while. She knows, right?
Right.
So he's going to think, what do you mean they just accepted my offer? Should I have offered less? Did I pay too much for that property? Offered even higher. And now you're telling me they accepted it? I could have gotten the property for less. Okay, none of this conversation happened with the buyer, but is that what's going on in your buyer's head? Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
I said, hello, buyer. Hey, guess what? The listing agent and I have been talking all day about different scenarios and what we could do to make this work, which was true. And what the options were, there was another buyer that was potentially submitting an offer, but prior to that offer coming in, we were able to put this whole deal together, and congratulations, we got your offer accepted. So do you see how in that language, I basically let the buyer know, hey, they were on the fence on whether they were going to accept your offer or not, but good job in writing a good, strong offer. Plus, you had a great agent on the other end, me. And we were able to put this deal together, right? So now you don't have a buyer who's thinking in the back of their head, I got screwed, I should have offered less, all of these different scenarios, right? So the important part of this whole conversation, you guys, is I want you to spend a little bit more time thinking about what is going through your client's mind. What are some potential scenarios that your buyer might be thinking? Like, what is happening in their head? What are they thinking is going on? Because if you start thinking about what the buyer might be thinking or the seller might be thinking, then you start to create scenarios and you start to look at ways that you can again pull a deal together. Because had I done it the other way, do you think that buyer the entire time when he's going through stuff, he's thinking, oh, I probably could have got a better deal. Oh, I think I'm going to need to ask him for credit for this or credit for that. Or he might just get frustrated altogether, think he overpaid, bail on that deal and go look at another house where you might not be so lucky.
Hi, Marguerite. This is Edwina. Based on the scenario you had provided, I've represented a buyer before, and what I did is I did a comp on the area and presented to them what the going price was in the market in the area, and they were the ones that, you know, they really wanted to purchase the home and added more money to their offer. But I think once you present them the facts of the comp, then they'll know that they're not, you know, the house that they're offering for is not being, you know, it's not overpriced.
Agreed. But again, if they have based their offer on the fact that they think there are multiple offers on the property, right?
Right.
And find out that their offer just got accepted as is with no counter, no matter what you gave them as far as comparables, that can backfire too, right? So let's say that the comparables on this particular property, it was listed at 850, came in at 825, and they offered 850. Again, I agree with you, provide comparables, provide that information and let them make the decision. But in this particular situation, what I was trying to get across was that the sellers just accepted their offer. Could mean, again, that the buyer is, what's going on in the buyer's head is they think they could have gotten the property for potentially less money had they known. Because again, do you think if the buyer knew that there were no other offers on the property and maybe the property had been on the market 10 to 14 days, he would have written the same offer?
No.
He would not have, right?
Right.
So again, it's not like we're trying to take advantage of this client or not. Values what somebody's willing to pay. What I'm trying to get across is that there's different ways of setting up the conversation when that happens. It doesn't happen very often that you just get an offer accepted as is without a counter. And when it does happen, it starts to raise questions in the buyer's mind. That's that's my point in the whole conversation. Okay, so what other scenarios might you guys have that you have experienced that we could talk through?
Okay, so I had a trustee of an estate selling the home, and he lived all the way out in Wairika, and he was trying to help this owner, sell off this last piece of property. My understanding was he just wanted to get it off his hands because it was too much for him to drive down from Wairika every weekend to help deal with this. So I asked, I got the listing with him, drew up some comps. He did his own due diligence. He had his own realtor that he uses personally up in Wairika. They said, okay, this is, initially we had agreed upon like 500, 515, somewhere around there. And then he had this other person who just did a desktop, appraiser, right? And said, no, that's worth 600. But it was a fixer and it had a bunch of trash and it was just all kinds of deferred maintenance that was needed on this property. And he basically said, okay, well, I'll sell it for 550. And I said, great, I have a buyer for you. So I'm double ending this thing. And he says, okay, well, that buyer is also going to pay half of the commission to you. My buyer agreed. He said, okay, since you found me this property, I'm willing to pay half the commission, willing to get rid of all the garbage and all the other stuff. And I've been bugging this seller, get me the, hold on just a minute, get me the payoff on this loan because there was a reverse mortgage on this property. And he kept putting it off. Sure enough, they get a statement, a seller's net proceeds, and it's not what he had expected. And he was just like, oh my gosh. And I was just like, well, you told me you knew exactly how much the payoff was on this loan. He said, but that's not the same. It's not, this isn't, getting $100,000 back from the sale of this property is not going to work. We already had all the contingency signed and we were ready to go, and he was just needing to sign. So he's like, well, I'm going to hire a local appraiser there, and I'm going to do what I can to back out of this deal because it's not, I don't think we're getting enough. And I'm like, great, you could absolutely do what you need to do to, back out. But this is the blowback from it. You could go to arbitration, and in the chance that you do get, things in your favor, you're going to have to relist the property and find a buyer for this that's willing to pay half the commission and at the price that you want. So I let him, do what he needed to do. He actually had his realtor from up there call me, and he had 100% had my back. And she was just like, oh my God, that's his fault for not looking at the contract, not, doing his due diligence. And I told him, your agent's right. He did everything he could, and the buyer did everything, succumbed to every demand that you wanted. There was no budging on the price. There was no credit, no nothing. And he paid half the commission. My only recourse for my seller was to just give him information. I just said, look, I understand how you feel, and this is what it is, and you trust me, if you can get out of this deal, let me know. But right now you're acting against broker advice. So I had to generate letters from the buyer to him, a letter to me to him, and it was just crazy. And then he finally came to his senses after his friend, who was a realtor that reached out to me. She basically told him, you either go through with it or you're going to spend more money on this and time. And he ended up he basically said, okay, I'll follow through with the deal. And we got paper signed and deal was closed.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and this is not in any way implying that there's any, any fault or responsibility. Number one, did you do a net sheet up front with the seller? Okay.
And it was based off his numbers.
Off of his numbers, off the commission, off the loan balance demand, the mortgage statement. Okay.
Yes.
Do you actually have a copy of the mortgage statement?
Yes.
Okay, so you had a copy.
It was an older copy. I want to say it was like maybe 4 months removed, because the guy didn't really, the owner of the house that was living there, he misplaced a lot of things, and that's all he could find.
Okay. So let's also address a couple things with regards to a reverse mortgage, because you didn't bring this up. You talked about a reverse mortgage, but I just want to make sure everyone on the call understands a little bit about reverse mortgages, because we'll start to see more and more of that. Number one, when somebody has a reverse mortgage, a few things come up that can be an issue for the estate. Number one, when somebody has a reverse mortgage on their home, the banks literally check the obituaries and the public records daily to see who has died. The banks will know immediately that the person in that home has passed away under a reverse mortgage situation. And then they will notify the family immediately of what the options are. Okay. And so the bank will send out a letter to the house. They might not have the next of kin. They might not have the people who are part of the estate's information. They will mail it to the house. So if the family is not living at the house, it's entirely possible they won't see the letters that come from the bank. I want you guys to understand a few things on reverse mortgages. Number one, the estate has 1 year to sell that home from the date of death. 1 year. Well, actually not sell the home. They have 1 year to make a decision. And here are the options that the letter will lay out with regards to a reverse mortgage. Number one, the estate can sell the home if there is equity in the home. If they want to, they can sell the home, and any equity in that home would go to the estate. Number two, if there's not equity in the home, the estate can do a short sale. The bank will actually do their own appraisal on the home, and they will notify the estate of what the appraisal came in at, and they will sell the home at 95% of the appraised value that the bank came up with of the home. So for example, if the home is $100,000 and the appraisal comes in at $100,000, the bank will sell the home for $95,000. Okay. Now keep in mind, if the home is worth more than that, then that money could go to the estate. The estate also has the option of doing a deed in lieu, basically signing the house over to the bank, just signing it over and giving it to the bank. They can allow the bank just to foreclose, or the family, the estate, can purchase the home themselves. Again, at 95% of the appraised value, they could buy the home. Regardless, they have to make a decision one way or another. If they don't make a decision, the bank will foreclose, okay? And they'll take the home and foreclose like they would in any other way. So the estate will get this information and have the opportunity to make a decision, but they do have a time limit. They can't just like write it out for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. They have to make a decision when it comes to the home. No payments are being made because it's a reverse mortgage. So it's not like they have to worry about making payments, but they do have to make a decision. Now, I brought up the question, did he do a net sheet? Because I can't tell you how many times I see an agent not prepare any kind of net sheets. They assume that the seller knows what they owe, and they assume that the seller will know what the bottom line is. And that's a huge mistake. Hopefully in an upcoming class, I think I've done this before, but I'll do a seller net sheet class. I think I did it a couple months ago, so it might be in our Facebook group. But there's huge value in, number one, getting the net sheet done up front so that the seller is crystal clear on what they are anticipating getting for the home or not. He's handled it very well. He basically said, you can't just cancel. I mean, you can, but there's going to be litigation if you do, and there's responsibility, and you're doing it against my advice. The fact that the buyer agreed to pay half the commission, impressive as well, right? That just gives you some scenarios in understanding how reverse mortgages work and making sure that even in not a reverse mortgage situation, that your seller has seen the estimated net sheet. And I recommend that you do them yourself in addition to having one done generated by the title company. If you are getting an old statement, like it sounds like Chris did, he had a 4 or 5 month old statement. It's really strongly advised that the seller call and get an estimated payoff, or that you hand it to the title company and have them request an actual payoff so you actually know what the true numbers are. Because that could have been maybe a $10,000 to $20,000 price difference, depending on how long it'd been since they made, the loan had changed or payments had been made, or things like that. So those are all things to keep in mind. There was no notice of default, by the way, because it was a reverse mortgage, which means the bank will allow them up to a year to move forward with the property without filing a notice of default.
A couple of things too. What I also did, Marguerite, was I saved all the emails that I sent to him asking him, did you get the loan payoff? Did you get the loan payoff? I saved every single one of those emails in my file asking him, and I got his responses on there. Yes, everything's taken care of. This is what we're going to have. And I said, okay, great. So, great. I mean,
you always want to create a folder in your email, ideally, and keep all emails inbound and outbound. Keep them all. When the file closed, you technically should keep them up for 4 years. Keep them as part of your file folder. So, yeah. Awesome. Great job.
I have another scenario here, if you're willing to listen out. Okay, so I have a potential sale. This is a blended family that the brothers and siblings, they do not get along. We actually went in there to help out the surviving spouse, who is not related at all to these children that are supposed to split up their farm after their recent father had passed away. So their biological mom died early, and then the dad just died, and everything was held in trust. The new wife was never on title, and there was a reverse mortgage on this property. After the father had passed away, the successor trustee or executor of this trust, it was discovered that she was not completely there because she suffered a stroke. Second in line was the brother, who has been incarcerated a couple times. The younger sister, who she does not like, basically said, look, these are the things that he does, and I don't think he's going to follow through with what dad's and mom's wishes are. He's got friends living on dad's property that are just going to literally living off the farm, and getting dad's items and selling them to support their drug habit. And these are all her beliefs. Her concern is, look, he's not going to do anything. He's going to sit there and, we're going to lose the property and we're not going to get anything out of it. Actually when I met with the family, the son actually said, can I try to purchase the property? And we were like, absolutely, you could buy it for the full market value. He was just interested in buying the property for himself to satisfy the reverse mortgage. But in the trust, it says upon the demise of the dad, that property was to be split 3 ways. So he can't just go in there and satisfy the loan and then live off the farm and continue living the way he is. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's a very complicated scenario. You could kind of see that where the brother is kind of disheveled and not all together there. But I kept telling the younger sister, who calls me on a daily basis, what can I do? What are my options? And I keep telling her I'm not an attorney, but these are people that you can call on if you want to make, file a petition, take over as the executor. And it's going to cost money, but again, these are things that you need to take on your own. I'm not advising you, but I'm just telling you this is the proper process for doing that. Have you ever just considered just talking to your brother and seeing if he'll do what he'll do? And she goes, well, not really, because I just know he'll do it. And I was just like, well, you need to give him the benefit of the doubt, because although he might have these things on his record, he might realize that, look, you need to sell this home. Otherwise, you're not going to get jack squat, anything, because there's still equity left in the left there. So it's a very complicated case. I actually have a call with an attorney. I referred her to an attorney. He's going to call her at 7:15 tonight to see what her options are to petition to file if her brother doesn't do what he's supposed to do. The other thing is that they got a notification that they only have 180 days to satisfy the loan, not a year. Right. And when I met there, the attorney said, yeah, that's actually, they could. They could put a
reverse mortgage on it?
Yes. So my
understanding, they have 1 year, but it depends. I would assume it depends on the terms of
their contract. Yeah.
It goes from the date of death. So it doesn't necessarily go from when somebody's notified. So, grandma dies December 1st and the family's just now getting around to selling the home. Well, 6-7 months have passed already, right? Which means that they have a year from when grandma died. Not necessarily from when it's determined that they want to sell it or, type of thing. Because again, on reverse mortgages, they don't have a lack of payment date. So it's not like they skipped payments for 4 or 5 months. There have been no payments because it was a reverse mortgage. So I'll tell you that estates and family matters get really complicated. And hopefully there's attorneys involved. I mean, I'll give you guys one last scenario and then we'll wrap up. I had a situation where this was actually a family situation. A family member was married. Her husband ended up committing suicide. She ended up with the house. She had 3 children. So several years later, she decides to sell the house. And again, she's widowed. She buys another house in Newcastle, and then she gets remarried. There's no will in place, no estate, no nothing. She gets remarried. She marries a much older man, thinking that, I'm sure she thought he was going to die before she did. Marries a much older man. Again, she has 3 kids. He has kids. She adds him to the title of the house. She dies first. The house automatically, because it was a community property estate, reverts to the husband. Now the husband dies. Guess who gets the house? His kids. Her kids got nothing. The entire house, the guy didn't have a pot to piss in when he married her. He had all the equity from the house that she had sold from her previous husband. They owned the house free and clear. So his kids ended up with the house and all the equity in the home. Her kids ended up with nothing. The importance of a will or a trust or something for people. And I try to tell people this all the time. Like, trust me, please go get something in writing, put something in place. People wait. They think they have time and they don't have time. These are all important things to think about. And this is the value of this conversation. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I hope you got some good information and some good insight. We'll definitely talk more about scenarios in the upcoming classes because this helps a lot, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Thanks, Marguerite. Those are
Marguerite.
really good
Very
stuff.
good.
Marguerite. Yeah. All right, you guys, feel free to send me your scenarios and we'll talk about them in future classes coming up.